Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to day 2 of the Green Economy Coalition's first ever online global meeting. It's a privilege to be with you. I hope that many of you were with us yesterday. There are some people that weren't, and so I will do a little bit of an intro again to the overall idea of the event and its outcomes and objectives. But if I could just say, next slide, Ben, if I could just say a little bit about the GEC in case you've not encountered us before. We're just over 10 years old, and we've got a strategy for the next 10 years, which is really economic reform in a generation. We are a collaboration for action network, bringing all sorts of different organizations together, really with a sense of let's explore what economic reform means. Let's see what sustainable development economy looks like. Let's bring agendas of, if you're interested in climate change, biodiversity, inequality, persistent poverty. We have largely concluded that many of these are manifestations of a deeper economic problem. Our economic model is no longer fit for purpose. It needs to be much more explicitly net zero. It needs to be nature positive. It needs to be explicitly improving our societal conditions and our well-being. So a lot of that work we've done over the last few years, we've created ideas of the overall landscape of this transition. I draw your attention to our barometers. I also draw your attention to things like our shared principles, which underpin the sort of action we're talking about. Also draw your attention to our policy framework, 5 different themes of policy change that we see that governments must improve on. How you measure an economy, a different sort of success. What does success look like under this new economy? How do you move the money? How do you change the sectors, make them greener? How do you make this explicitly pro-poor and addressing inequality? And how do we create a new relationship with nature? All of that captured in our fabulous tracker work. I recommend that to you. And we create change in 4 ways: telling a story, recognizing this is ultimately a cultural shift. Building new policies, influencing policies, building the coalition. Generally, we have, if I could summarize, we have a theory of change which says we are about mobilizing more and more people into this space of demanding a new economic system. And we are about providing what are the solutions for that new economic system. So the two come together, a big enough mobilized society that demands new economic reforms with specific policies that can make it happen. So that's the GEC. If I go to the next slide, Ben, the agenda for the week, we see across the center, we see the core GEC coalition day conversations. Yesterday was really the big picture, code red. The second today, we're on Inequality Day, why inequality matters. Day 3 is about nature. Day 4, we'll have a big media event, put the green recovery on trial. And day 5 will be a coalition day, how we build our networks that supports this growing movement. We also have around that a number of different side events. If you weren't there today, this morning, we had if you missed it, we had a fabulous session on small green enterprises and finance run by our partner Development Alternatives. We'll have a networking event later on this afternoon. Just come along and meet people. And a workshop on the Green Index tomorrow morning, stories for change in the afternoon. So hopefully you've got that agenda and you can look at this and you can pick those sessions that matter most to you. I really just want to sort of set up today's conversation now. Inequality matters. Inequality is the priority for the GEC for the next few years. We have championed inclusion, and inclusion, we're very, very proud of our work with our hubs to really start to bring more and more people into this conversation. Inclusion matters. Inclusion delivers results. Inclusion accelerates the transition when people buy into it. But we talked yesterday, Kumi Naidoo gave a really keen insight. He said we need to change our gaze, not just look at power, but look to people, their agency, their activism, their challenge, so that we are able to mobilize a movement that is you cannot ignore it. It is so powerful, so big, that the transition must accelerate and it must deliver on people's well-being and their security and futures. Now, that's Inequality we know matters. We know that in COVID moment, this is moment now, we see that over half the world's population have not got access to social security, no income security from their social protection. You know, inequality is getting worse. And why does that matter? We know that people's livelihoods are being challenged by this COVID moment. But we also know that if you're going to trust your politicians to go on this difficult transition to a green economy, you must be involved. You must feel your voice is being represented. You don't trust your governments. We're going to find this policy change, this leadership change from government very, very difficult. And the whole transition, we contend, rests on making it inclusive and fair. And that's what we want to talk about today. And with that, I say this is the most important frontier. We were going to hear a little bit about social contract or eco-social contract, the idea of really giving people that space to demand of their politicians that they want this transition to accelerate, to deepen, and to be fair. With that, that's enough from me. Great to have you here. I'm going to pass over to Stuart Worsley, who runs our hub work and our hub networks and engagement, and take us through the agenda of today. Stuart, over to you. Thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. My name is Stuart Worsley. I'm, for my sins, I'm known as the director for the country programs of GEC. It's a real privilege to work with a whole team of countries around the world who work on inclusion, who work on inequality. Today, we're going to discuss how a better social contract can drive a green economy transition. We're going to hear from Peru. We're going to hear from GEC's policy director, Naj Mohammed. And more importantly, we're going to hear from you. There's going to be a bit of a presentation, but quite a lot of discussion. I hope you're comfortable with that. I hope you didn't just come to listen, but you also came to bring your wisdom, because for sure we need it. So we're going to use breakout rooms in Zoom. And with those breakout rooms, we're going to attach Jamboards. The Jamboards we will talk you into as we get there at that point. But you will have a host in your group to have a discussion, and we'll be asking you for recommendations. We really want to listen to what you have to say. So let's get going. First of all, I think the best way to start this is to start telling the story from one of our countries. Now, let me introduce you first and foremost to Luis Miguel Prado. Luis is the director of production, head of production at Libélula. I see you've put the slide flow up on there for the session, Ben, thank you. I was just talking about Luis is on screen now. Luis is the head of production at Libélula. Libélula is a fabulous institution that works out of Peru and have made some really groundbreaking work in bringing together small green enterprises into a process through inclusion to make stuff happen. So, Luis, could you tell us your story?
Yes, thank you, Stuart, and warm greetings to all from Peru. Ben, can you change for the next slide? Okay, so MSMEs are the arteries of our country. They represent 98% of all enterprises, contribute to 80% of the economic active population, and are an important source of innovation. So when we were confronted with the challenge of greening our economy, it was evident that they had to be the catalyst for the transition that we needed. So we decided to put much of our efforts into empowering green MSMEs to elevate their competitiveness and resilience in the market, with the hopes of increasing the ratio of green enterprises in the universe of MSMEs and inspire others to go this way. Next, please. So as we got closer to these green MSMEs, we learned that they were feeling alone and neglected, struggling to make it on their own. So we thought it was very necessary to create a community to make them stronger. And as we got closer, we began to discover very beautiful and inspiring stories of the change we seek. So we started to include them in our rhetoric for change, to put those stories and these brave entrepreneurs who are making the green transition a reality on the spotlight. And from them, everything began to come alive. Next, please. As a community, these new enterprises started to gain visibility in public spaces. Next. To showcase the benefits of the green economy. Next, please. To prove that it is possible to make businesses in a more sustainable way. Next. To inspire other entrepreneurs for change. Next. To lift their voices to policymakers. And next. And to help make the changes we need. Last year, as a community and in alliance with the B Corps, we helped push the debate and the approval in Congress of the big law, a law that differentiates collective and benefit enterprises from the rest, a legal status that will help consumers choose between enterprises that create benefits for society from the rest. Next, please. And then suddenly COVID-19 struck, and it struck really hard for Peru and MSMEs, of course. Peru was very severely hurt, but not only affected the economy, it also brought to light many of the hidden deficiencies that haven't been able to solve in many years. Next, please. But it is in these really hard times where a community becomes most important. And as a community, we found strength in each other. And we began to organize virtual events to inform new government regulations and incentives. Many of our speakers were green entrepreneurs or specialists that saw an opportunity in this community. Next, please. Next slide. And because we are a community, we had, no, sorry, that's one, the other one. Can we go back one? Yeah, okay. So we had to reinvent ourselves. And because we are a community, we became attractive to virtual commerce instruments. And we were able to create alliances to open new channels to expose new products. Next, please. And because we are a community, new doors open. And I'm very happy to announce that tomorrow we are hosting an event on the second most bigger city in Peru to launch the green economic reactivation of this region. And this event, which we co-hosted with the mayor of Arequipa, he will launch the a green table to meet regularly with relevant actors to co-construct their green reactivation path for the region. And it's also in this event where Caja Arequipa, a very relevant rural bank, will announce the assignment of a 3 million soles fund, a bit less than $1 million, to co-create soft loans for green MSMEs. So we are very excited for this new path that's coming up in front of us. We have 23 other regions and a long way to go. But whatever the challenges we may face, we feel confident because we are part of a community that makes us stronger. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. What a fabulous story. You have just showed us how being together, lifting our voices together, we can actually change policies, we can become attractive together, new doors open when we stand together, And you've just proved how you leverage change. What I would like to now do is to pass over to our policy director, Najma Mohammed. She's the director of policy at the Green Economy Coalition. And we are exploring ways in which to develop a new social contract. To explain what that means and why we would do this, Najma has the answers. Listen well, because we want you to pick your brains on what she has to say. Najma, over to you.
Thank you so much, Stuart, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you the work that we've been doing over the last year. I must say, as Luis Miguel just shared his work, this has been work that has been really giving me a lot of hope in the challenging time that all of us have been through, seeing small businesses, citizens, workers, communities, farmers, young people, indigenous peoples calling for a new social contract for people and the planet together. And so I hope to share with you what we're learning. I don't have all the answers, but I'm glad that we're on a journey of learning together. So if I can go to the next, I'm having there we go, some challenge to shift my slide. So what is the context that we've all been facing? We're all still in the midst of quite a challenging context. And when Oxfam, a GEC coalition member, released this report last year, they called the COVID-19 pandemic the inequality virus, because the pandemic has indeed exposed the scale of global inequalities and is likely to exacerbate them. We've seen during the pandemic, the super wealthy have only gotten richer, and the massive concentrations of wealth are creating massive concentrations of carbon. 4 in 5 people of the OECD feel that income disparities are too large in their country, and people care about inequality of both outcomes and opportunities. At this critical moment, or right before this critical moment, there was declining trust of people, of citizens in institutions, governments, business, and media, at a moment when we need to trust our governments. Civic space is declining year by year. Across the 2 years of the pandemic, we've seen farmer groups, citizens, workers take to the street, fighting for their rights. And as more and more people feel underrepresented by their political systems, social unrest and populism is growing. This unspoken agreement between citizens and the state, the social contract, is broken. And it has been for a long time. It's been broken for women, it's been broken for young people, indigenous peoples, minority groups, and many others across the world. So for those of us working on this agenda of transitioning to a green and fair economy, this is a big challenge. Growing inequality and rising distrust undermines the transition to a climate resilient and sustainable economic system. We've seen it across the world. We cannot embark on a societal transition without the society with and behind this transition. Most organizations working on green policy, decarbonization, and environmental protection know that they must address inequality. And equally, inequality campaigners and champions are beginning to recognize that inclusive green economies can tackle the systemic inequality that they're fighting. So the transition to a green and fair economy requires deep social support. It's not a nice to have, it is key if we are to achieve a just transition. And so to really achieve genuine mass support for climate and environmental action, we need to reconnect with people's lives. We need to connect with what matters to people: jobs, clean air, drinking water, safe housing. We must ensure that green policies, plans, and investments explicitly address inequality, poverty, unemployment, lack of skills, and a number of other injustices. And only then will the transition truly be inclusive. But this is a moment of opportunity. And I remember yesterday, Kumi Naidu was saying that we've got to start flipping the script, changing how we speak about this challenge. It is indeed overwhelming and it's painful because people are being hurt in this moment. But we also know that this is a time for action, and a political space for tackling inequality has opened up. We're seeing diverse and unusual champions are calling for a new social contract: labor movements, young people, some UN bodies, and even the World Economic Forum. COVID-19 has indeed opened up this public discourse and making us recognize that the connection between human health and well-being and the planetary health is there. In some places, citizens' voices, priorities, and demands are being sought to accelerate the green transition and recovery. We've seen a plethora of citizens' assemblies, public dialogues, multi-stakeholder consultations happening. And we're also hearing about spaces that are closing down. And people are holding their governments to account. Globally, the climate litigation cases, the number of climate change-related cases have more than doubled since 2015. And we've just seen the recent high-profile cases in Germany and the Netherlands. So we are seeing this movement. We're seeing civil society fighting and getting a seat at the table, advising the governments and holding them to account as we see the biggest public spending that most of us are likely to see in our lifetimes. We're seeing innovative citizen participation like climate assemblies popping up all over the world. And one of the colleagues yesterday said the biggest hope in this moment is the young people standing up and asking for their future, the health and the well-being of their future to be taken into account. So what is the social contract that we speak about? Sounds like a big word, but it's really just an agreement between citizens and governments about the mutual rights and responsibilities that will uphold a just social order. And increasingly we're realizing that that just social order is not only the relationships within society between all of us as people, but the recognition that the social contract must address the relationship between human beings and nature, between us and the planet, and spur this transformation of economies and societies to halt climate change and fight inequality and stop environmental degradation. And so, yes, it's the informal values and relations between citizens and the state, but it can also be expressed in formal documents such as constitutions, charters, or declaration, or explicit laws and regulations. And in practice, I could have structured my entire intervention today around this, because this is the area that excites me. It's given me a lot of hope to see these stories across this difficult moment that we're in. The labor movement, the ITUC, is documenting wins from the trade union movement across the world, where unions in this hard moment have won big advances towards a new social contract between business, government, and workers. From Spain, we see a social contract that's focused on the democratization of access to energy, a model of energy rights that includes an intergenerational perspective on environmental sustainability, that includes young people in this choice and in the plans that we're making for the future. From New Zealand, we've indeed seen so much innovation come, Just Transition Summit and consultation plans that happened across the country with communities, regions, and sectors to formulate a plan for the country to transition to a low emissions economy. In the US, in the run-up to the elections, we saw the Green Deal Network put forward the US Thrive Act, a transformational economic policy vision to address the social and environmental and climate injustices. In South Africa, I've been watching the case here at home in anticipation that there's going to be a landmark case, a legal challenge by two South African environmental justice organizations taking the South African government to court on the constitutional right that everyone has a right to a clean and healthy environment. In France, the French Citizens Assembly, a panel representative of a diversity of French people directly involved in submitting proposals for climate legislation in France. I could continue the Talanoa dialogues, the citizens holding power to account through litigation in Germany and in Netherlands. But I think, I hope I've made the point that this is not a conceptual idea. This is happening in practice, and citizens are beginning to hold their government to account. What is the vision that we have with this work is really to convene a progressive intersectional alliance and movement of climate, environmental, and inequality champions to highlight the pathways, the procedures, and mechanisms for renegotiating a new social contract in practice. We've been reaching out and speaking to movements that are working on racial justice, decent work, climate justice, indigenous rights, intergenerational justice, the youth voice, business and human rights, and gender justice, trying to bring together these diverse perspectives on how we can craft a just, new, and inspiring social contract that will spur this transformation to a new society and economy. Where are we at? We're at the start, and we have a vision of taking this work quite big. We've, at the inception and really the connection phase, we've made incredible connections with organizations working on social justice, bringing the coalition members together with movements working on inequality. We started to build thought leadership. We've just launched a podcast, and I'll tell you more about that if you haven't yet seen it. And we've started reaching out to funders to sensitize them to the idea that social movements have a critical role to play in this transition as we go forward. We've started to connect. So we've launched a research and action network for an eco-social contract with UNRIS, with the UN Research Institute for Social Development, on the 10th of November. Some of you might have been there. It was a fantastic moment. And we're starting to strengthen the partnerships. So where do we want to go next? We want to continue learning. We want to understand what are the words, the concepts, the ways that people articulate this idea of a social contract. Is it about trust, accountability? Is it about the just social order? What does it mean in different contexts and for different movements across the world? And we want to understand what are the mechanisms for redefining social contracts. Are they the inclusive processes that we've listened to? Are there the sort of new innovative methods of citizen participation? And we'd love then to get the resources behind us to ramp up this program of work for a long-term program where we identify some of the lighthouse actions that really illustrate citizen action and draw the lessons from these to build a movement for a new social contract. So I promise to give you a bit of a taste of what we're doing, and we'll hopefully at the end of our session today share a bit more about the Research and Action Network. But if you haven't yet seen it, we have launched a podcast that's hosted by Kumi Naidu, who's been an advisor for us on this work in the last few months. And Kumi's had a fantastic series of conversations thus far with activists, artists, community leaders on the front lines of building a new social contract, leading thinkers on gender justice, ecological democracy, anti-racism. It's really a wonderful series to listen to. And so I encourage all of you to visit it and enjoy listening to it at your leisure. And so thank you for your attention. We hope that you'll join us as we build this intersectional movement to redefine a social contract that's fit for a fair and green economic transition. Thank you so much. Thank you, Stuart. Over to you.
So I'm just watching the chat stream here on the right-hand side of my screen, and it's kind of going crazy. We've got people asking questions. This sounds wonderful. I want to know more. So I'm going to give you that chance right now. We're going to get a chance to know more. We're going to go into a conversation. We're going to go into a discussion, and let's do more together. So now it's time for you. This is the breakout sessions, and I want to get your advice. We want to get your advice. I've got two questions I want to ask you. We'll do them one at a time. First question is, if we are going to have a social contract, what is it that Najma said about the social contract? That agreement between citizens and government about mutual rights, that relationship between human beings and nature to spur the transformation of economies and societies, to halt climate change and environmental destruction. Were we to have such a thing? Were we to have such a contract? What should be in it? What would need to be in that contract to enable a green economy? So that's going to be your first question. Now, could you please share? Oh, I see we've got in the links, we've got Jamboards linked. Don't click on any of these quite yet, because what's going to happen is you're going to be assigned to a group. And as you go to a group, if you're in group 1, please click on the Jamboard for group 1. If you're on group 2, click on the Jamboard for group 2. If you happen to get lost and you click on the wrong one, don't worry, you can navigate back. So here's what I'm going to do. If you allow me, I'm just going to share my screen, and I think it's worth taking a couple of minutes to walk you through how a Jamboard works and what does it look like. So on my screen, on your screen now, you should be able to see my Jamboard. Najma, could you put your thumbs up and tell me if you can see that? Great, good. That means if Najma can see it, we can all see it. So here we've got group number 1. And this would be a group that would be hosted by Anna. And if you're assigned to this group, there's a question in the middle. What one ask would you want in a social contract that would enable a green and fair economy? Now, in the corners, I've put 4 different dimensions of that question. So if you take what one ask would you want in a social contract for people to hold power to account? What one ask for people to be able to actively participate? What one ask would you want for people to be able to debate and choose public options? And what would you want for people to be able to shape their local agendas? Now, talk amongst yourselves, and if you have any comments, you pick up one of these Post-its and you double click on it and you type your comment in there and you save it and your comment will be there. Now, if you run out of these because you're too busy, go over to the left-hand side of your screen here and you can see you can create a new little sticky and off you go. And that's all there is to it. I would encourage you to move your comments over to the places where you think that they belong the best. If you feel that your comment is about holding government to account, park up here in the top left. If you feel your comment is about enabling people to actively participate in society, go up here to the right. So you've got a question in the middle, you've got a corner, which gives you a dimension of that question. You've got a Post-it note, and at the end of this, your host, you're going to have about 25 minutes. So at around about 20 minutes into your discussion, your host is going to ask you, okay, let's see if we can sum up. And as a group, I would love you to come up with a clause, one kind of statement that you'd say, that's what I want in the social contract. Now, I hope that's not all as clear as mud. I hope that's understandable for you. You have a host in your group. Your host has been able to go through the boards already and should be able to talk you through. So I commend you to one another. Have a brilliant discussion. Come back in 25 minutes and give us a clause that should go into a social contract based on the one ask that you want. Thank you. Have fun. Welcome back, everyone. So as you all dribble back in, I hope you've had a great conversation. I'm going to give it just a few minutes and let everybody back in because, you know, the last thing I'd want is to miss anybody out. Bear in mind, this is a session about inclusion. So here we are together. I want to make sure we're all together. And I think we are. So here goes. I would like to get in 20 seconds from each of you, what was your main one ask for inclusion in a social contract? Group one, Anna Amulpire. Could I have, in 20 seconds, what was your main ask from your group?
My main group was creating safe spaces to engage in decision-making processes, especially for groups that are not in the government, civil society, vulnerable groups, women and marginalized people. That was one of them. And then ensuring inclusive accountability platforms for all the stakeholders. Again, keeping in mind that we don't want to keep the vulnerable groups out of these decision-making processes and platforms. The key word for us was effective, meaningful engagement in decision-making. And lastly, we discussed the issue of empowerment and capacity building for people to effectively engage in policy-making processes. That's it from us, Stuart.
Thank you. What a rich discussion. I've got all of your details on your Jamboard, and that's going to be saved for posterity. Mohak Gupta, could I ask you to summarize very quickly for group two?
Thank you, Stuart. So a lot of the points were covered by group one, so I won't repeat them, but broadly speaking, two of the things that came out was one, the issue of power inequalities and how do we address those in terms of creating meaningful dialogue and making sure everyone's voices are heard. And another thing that came up was the role of education as an enabler to drive public debate and to create more informed debaters, basically, so people can participate effectively. So those were the value adds, I think.
Thank you, Mohak. That's great. Sounds like a good discussion. Yatika, in group three, can I have your 20-second summary?
Thanks, Stuart. And I think I will also echo of the last two groups. Fortunately, in our group, it's all women group, but there are a lot of women issues that has been discussed a lot. So first of all, I should come from the point of rights to resources and opportunities in the labor market. and over wealth. For the women, digital literacy, which is also very important, and also the flexible timing and equality in the payment structure for both men and women. That should be, I think, should come as in the social contract.
Thank you. Strong gender representation. We need to make sure that women are strong and central. Tanya from Group 5, can I have your 20-second summary?
Okay, so group number 5 came up with the following points, that creating a safe spaces, building trust, transparency, having transparency, ownership, and a better representation from grassroots organization and groups with regards to policy development and implementation.
Stella, Group 4.
Hi. Yes. So two main things that our group, the main points that we discussed were making sure that citizens have access to the right and correct information, because there's a lot of false information that keeps floating. So that's something that's important, and to have a mechanism that the facts that are floated get checked so that the citizens can respond accordingly. And the second one was that all citizens have adequate legal support so that they can effectively participate. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Elise from Group 6. 20 seconds.
Yes, for us, it was definitely a power distribution, greater transparency in policy making, access to reliable information for decision making to participate in the green economy, inclusivity, very important for us. And one of our members mentioned we want to understand how budgets are related to the decisions that's being made by government. So transparency.
Thank you very much. And last but definitely not least, Barbara.
Stuart, thank you very much. Our group, our sum up statement was really the need to demystify concepts of green economy, what it does, and what it means for social contract. And that should be our starting point. We also discussed the need for a civil society-led process together with governments to take center stage from national leaders and have a platform for change. We need to build trust, moving beyond pilot programs and experiments to real long-term commitments. And last but not least, we talked about a fair, efficient, and progressive tax system. And that's what we discussed in Group 7. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm struck by the richness and the range. This is fabulous. This is exactly what we want. And thank you for that. Now, that was your easy task, because I'm now going to take you on to a slightly more difficult task. I would like you to go back into your breakout groups, and I've got a second question for you. It'll be, you will have the same group leads. I cannot guarantee that everybody is going to be put back into the group that they were originally in, which is all the merrier, because you might get a nice little mix up, but group leads will remain the same. I have a second question for you. So if we're going to do all of this, and if these are the things that need to be done, what participatory processes work best to enable citizens to engage with their governments? And give us examples of this. So what works best? So in your Jamboard, you're going to get a link. I mean, if I could see the link, please, to be shared. Your Jamboard links, you will be able to navigate as you go before. When you get to your Jamboard, you're going to have 4 corners. And so your question, what participatory processes work best to enable citizens to engage governments to reach marginal people? So there's one corner for them. To build movement and momentum. So there's one corner for that. What participatory processes work best to make or inform important policy choices? And what participatory processes work best to gather crucial insights? So you've got 4 corners, you've got your stickers, you've got your pens. I suspect you're becoming experts now. I suspect you know how to use your Jamboards. I'm going to give you slightly longer this time. I'm going to give you the full time available, and you will be brought back at 1:30. So you've got 27 minutes. Please remember, 3 minutes, 4 minutes before your end, I'll send out a little message. I'd like you to summarize your top 3 methods. Now, and then we can get those methods back. This will give us together a sense of, you've already given us what, and now we're going to give us a sense of how. So thank you. Go back to your groups. Have a great discussion. I'll see you in 27 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. I hope that wasn't too much of a rude awakening. I got the sense that some of the groups were done with their work, so I thought, let's come back a little early and use this time together. Again, I hope you had a good discussion, and I'm going to go around the room again and do what we did before and start in reverse order. What I'd like you to do, again within 20 seconds, what were your top 3 participation methods or approaches your group decided would enable citizens to effectively engage their government? Going to start with Barbara, 20 seconds.
Thank you, Stuart. The first 3 top methods that we discussed as a group was having a youth social movement to demand for change. Because the youth is now, I mean, across the countries, the youth are now majority of the population, and therefore they have public space to send out messages to governments to demand for change. The second one was social media as a tool, and to be careful to use it appropriately, and in most cases complementary and not and rather than primary. So because social media is a two-edged sword, so social media can be used as a tool, and those were our main 2.
I think that as a third one, just to add, we could use involving prominent people and maybe thinking about how to gather the financial resources to make representatives pay attention to us.
Thank you. That's a great addition. Thank you, group 7. Can I go to group 6, Elise?
Sorry, there's my mic. Yes, so for us it was also responsible a 2-way kind of social media campaigns, but the emphasis on responsible. Number 2 was rural connectivity through engaging enterprises to work with communities on the ground, which are often not online and marginalized. So we need to be cognizant of that. And yeah, that was the main 2. We didn't have a third one necessarily. Maybe from Suzanne in Germany, we just shared that there's mandatory structures for stakeholder engagement, and it's usually through more from an employer and trade union. It's not necessarily from citizens. So maybe just stick to the first 2 for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Elise. Group 5, Tanya.
So for group number 5, first approach was formation of citizen assembly. Second is having legally acknowledged societal dialogue processes. And third is organization of mass protest and social media and policy debates before policies are revised.
What could you say your second one again? Formation of a citizen assembly, formation of deep society.
Second one is having legally acknowledged societal dialogue processes. Third is organization of mass protest.
Thank you. Group 4, Stella.
Yes, so I think the first one is something that's already come up. Citizen assembly is getting ordinary people to be randomly selected and share their opinions to know what people actually feel. Second one would be information, education, and communication, that is IEC material, brochures, wall paintings, articles, etc. And then the third one would be the role of specific case studies, which actually show evidence of tiny movements and how they gain power. So yes, small human-led stories that have shown to make change. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Gitika, group 3.
Yes, again, I am coming back with a lot of loads of points from the gender perspective. So first thing is the gender responsive budgeting. That's the most important, and that is also the participatory gender responsive participatory budgeting. Second one is monitoring and tracking of the public and private expenditure. Third, accountability metrics that's to be prepared for both government, private, as well as CSOs. And there's also corporate disclosure that should be mandatory for green and social impact. Yeah, I think
that's three. Thank you. That's excellent. Mohak from Group 2.
Yeah, sure, Stuart. So one thing was that we spoke about the two extremes. One was the idea of social media as a connector, but the idea of information as well as misinformation there. And at the other end, the importance of the time-tested on-ground engagement and sustained engagement was an important point, especially when we're reaching out to marginal people. That was one of the important points. The second one was we also talked a lot about youth-based approaches and giving them a sense of ownership in this process. So they are the ones who can be the change makers. Another important point I would like to say is that a lot of the idea is to avoid meeting fatigue and not only talk to people, but actually make sure that those discussions reach policymakers and get translated into action, so as to ensure that communities feel the confidence that what they're doing matters as well. So those were the three, I'd say.
Perfect. Sounds like you had a great group. Anna, final but not last.
Thank you, Stuart. The top three that we discussed in my group are facilitating dialogues between the stakeholders and the policymakers. That is having direct meetings with them, involving them in community meetings. And then social media. One of our participants said government already has set up social media platforms that are active and is a means of how they can participate in engaging them in policy change. The other is traditional media of using TV press shows and dialogues and talk shows on TV and radio. And then that's all media. And then the third is advocacy through the preparation of advocacy material like policy briefs, communiques, newspaper articles, and other reports intended to reach out to the duty bearers. Thank you, Stuart.
Again, what a rich, long list of amazing stuff. Thank you all so much. Now, I feel totally inadequate to be able to summarize this, but fortunately I'm not alone. I've got three experts here in the room who I would actually like to call on to do this. But before I call them in, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. You've got the links to the Jamboard. I would leave the Jamboards open for the rest of the day. If you fancy going back, if you have a thought mid-afternoon and say, do you know what? I've got a thought, I'm going to put that on the Jamboard. Please do so. I will close the Jamboards down later today, and you would then lose access. But if you could feel free to comment between now and the rest of the day, that'd be great. And it goes down for posterity, and we will take all the information of all of the Jamboards, and we will use this as your advisory to us. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to turn to three people in the room who have got something to say important on this. The first one is Aline Brandsteder. Aline works with the European Commission. She works within the DG for International Partnerships. Aline, you've just listened to all of us talking on for about an hour now about social contract, about participation. What did you hear? And what did you think of what you heard? Could you give us that in 3 minutes?
Thank you very much, Stuart. Thanks to everyone for the bustling brainstorming. It was my pleasure to be here and listen to each other over the last hour. Maybe so, just to sum it up. So what I heard that the question of inequalities goes beyond the policy agendas already existing on gender equality, on poverty reduction, on rights of indigenous people. So there is no blanket solution. It depends, of course, on the country where it's going to be put in place. What I found most important is this notion of no one should be left behind. And I think everybody agreed on this today. One of the ways to achieve this ambition is, of course, to prioritize education. I think that education is closely linked to employment, job creation opportunities. And of course, our young people in all countries will be primarily affected and will certainly want to say their word on how to drive this green transition. So maybe just to conclude, and it was proposed by one of the members of my group, the sense of ownership, especially among young people, how to create it will be key to really install this transition and drive it in a more innovative manner, basically from bottom to top. I was very pleased to be here today, and I hope that we can continue this discussion all together on how to better integrate inequalities in all important sectors of activity. So not only through the policy agenda, but also through mainstreaming in all of our actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aline. The powerful words coming from you. I do hear the European agenda coming in there, and I welcome it. The idea of women, the idea of youth, the idea of education, the idea of ownership, and inequality goes beyond just this, but it has to go across all sectors. Thank you for those words of wisdom. Nicole, you direct Canary. You're one of our members. You live on a beautiful Caribbean island, and the relevance, one might think, of the conversations that are happening in the rest of the world might be different in the Caribbean. What did you hear and what did you think?
Thanks, Stuart. I heard a lot of commonalities with participants from India and Africa and elsewhere in the world. So I think even though scale and context is different, we all have many methods we're using, and we're looking at innovating as well as using the traditional methods. But it made me think, if we have so many tools at our disposal, what are the gaps and needs? You know, are we really being effective? So kind of had four thoughts. One, the process needs resourcing. So we need resources to do this, and the process must also build capacity and be empowering. So we need to pay attention to our processes and resource them. Second, again, building on this idea of, are we reaching the most marginalized in our movement building, or is it that we're engaging people with capacity? So paying special attention to resources and methods to reach people that cannot use what other people use. Thirdly, are we being listened to? Are we just making a lot of noise? Are we targeting the right spaces? And I listened to Gitika's group on the participatory budgeting and monitoring of expenditure, and really made me think, are we focusing the right spaces? Do we need to focus on the flow of money as really where, you know, the buck meets the road, or whatever the expression is? Fourthly, are we driving the agenda, or are we just responding to the agenda? So I think a lot, at least in the Caribbean, a lot of the times we are responding to a government policy announcement or a proposed development, rather than being proactive and shaping a vision and really driving the agenda. So I think we need to challenge ourselves to think about how we can really be in the driver's seat more, and not just governments engaging us. Thank you.
Glad to hear that you don't feel out there on your own. There's a lot of commonalities between those beautiful beaches and islands and the waving palms and the cold north plains of Mongolia. We are all together in this, and it's delightful to hear that we have such commonality. Thank you, Nicole. Oliver, you're the convener of the Green Economy Coalition, and it's going to fall to us as a team to take this one forward. You've listened to the advice of a lot of people today. What did you hear, and what did you think?
Thank you. Look, the first thing I heard was how easy it was for this community to segue from, you know, green economy to inequality matters, you know, and whilst we found it easy, I think that there is a top level message that many people don't get as much as we do. And that is that inequality really matters. And that there is another crisis alongside the climate and the biodiversity crisis, and that is the growing inequality crisis. And I think that we have to just remember that not everybody gets what we get. And then the other thing we all around this community was the active participation of communities, how important the active participation of communities and marginalized groups is. I thought what Nicole was saying, her 4 points were absolutely fabulous, but you know, real special attention to marginalized and remembering what Kumi said to us last time. It's not just us facing up to policymakers, it's us changing our gaze to those marginalized communities and really finding new mechanisms, because the mechanisms are difficult. It is really difficult. And so I also agree with the processes need resources, the processes need innovation. We've experimented with dialogue processes and with experts. Our partnership hubs are all about organizations that really know how to engage with people. And we've done it on a shoestring. We need to do it at a much bigger scale. And the idea of social contracts, the idea that there is fundamentally a fraying or frayed or broken relationship between power and people, almost feels as if that we need to elevate us taking this to scale. We need to elevate the idea that there is a moment now to renegotiate relationships, to address structural inequalities, and to put on the table that this transition gives a once in a lifetime, once in a generation opportunity to address those structural inequalities, but only if we make it explicit. And I give practical examples of that. You know, anybody can build an out-of-town renewable energy, but not everybody can build a community energy. Why don't we target community energy rather than just GHG emissions? You know, so the opportunity presented by this transition to address structural inequalities will not happen unless we organize, unless we elevate that conversation to something really profound, i.e., it isn't a real green economy transition unless it has explicit, legally represented social and community participation as part of it. It doesn't get access to money. It doesn't get signed off as a budget unless it has those prerequisites of societal engagement and commitment by the governments themselves to make those societal engagement processes be supportive, active, and coherent and effective. And fundamentally, we have to break the mindset that we are sitting there accepting policy. I completely agree with Nicole. We need to be driving this agenda. I mean, just transition, I like it, but it's more still, they've made the decision, then they're working out who's going to be impacted. We want this transition to be owned by us and to be driven by us and remind politicians and power they serve us and they serve our needs, and keeping us safe and secure for the future and prosperous, more prosperous for the future is ultimately their responsibility. They need to be reminded of that. And they need to be reminded that we will organize and we will make sure that they are serving our needs, not the other way around. So I've heard a lot today. I think social contract is probably the thing that gets us, puts this agenda firmly from a sort of passive input into a demand that is central to this transition. And there's a lot of energy that I've heard across the piece, a lot of emerging contours of this work. And I look forward to developing it further so we're more and more coherent and more clear on what is our social contract demands. Thank you very much. Stuart, over to you.
Thank you very much, Oliver. So you lead me beautifully to the last moment that we have got on this, and that's what next. GEC is working with UNRISD, UNRISD, and we're working with them on a social contract. It's my pleasure to return back to Najma Mohammed, our Director of Policies, to talk to us a little bit more about the eco-social contract network that is being established between ourselves and UNRISD. It's an exciting piece of work. It's a piece of work we'd invite you to get involved in. Najma, over to you. Excite us once more.
Thank you so much, Stuart, for bringing me back in. I must say this has been an incredible day, an incredible session. I think we've learned so much, and the conversations were incredibly enriching for the work that we want to do. So on the 10th of November, the GEC and UNRWA launched the Global Research and Action Network for a new eco-social contract. And the network is meant to be a space for dialogue, debate, co-construction, and action around the meaning of a new eco-social contract. And it will also seek to identify good practices where citizens are renegotiating and designing a new eco-social contract. I hope I can see on my screen that Paul Ladd was able to join us in the last hour of our session. I hope that the technicians can assist me to bring Paul onto the discussion platform with me. It's been an incredible experience. The launch saw more than 20 organizations actually speak and express their support for this moment from diversity of backgrounds. We also at that moment were introduced to a new initiative happening in 2022, the People's Summit, and I'll post the link in the chat soon, which will be themed around the thematic co-building a new eco-social world, and GEC and UNRWA are our partners in putting that summit together. But if I could hand over to Paul Ladd for 1 or 2 words on the network, Stuart, if that's possible, from the technical side.
Okay, thank you, Najma. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Oliver. Perhaps I can just add that we're really excited about the possibilities of the network. We've been working on the concept and doing research that hopefully supports communities around the world to negotiate new eco-social contracts. And we think that having this network and this collaboration with GEC and its partners will help us to learn from each other about how, in different contexts, in different sectors, communities are basically campaigning and pushing boundaries on social justice and environmental justice. And we see it as, I think, a flat space in which people can both contribute and learn on how this is already happening around the world. And then secondly, we've sort of split it between us, Najma and I, but there's a separate initiative that people may be interested in and think is complementary to the ongoing work of the GEC. As my role as director in UNRWA, I've been working with social work representative groups around the world for the last 3 or 4 years, and one of them is the International Federation of Social Workers. And Rory Trull joined you earlier in this meeting, but had to step away for an emergency. And as we've worked together, we've seen a real possibility and an alignment in values that we share in terms of social and environmental justice. And we have collaboratively been working on a People's Summit for Leaving No One Behind that will be held at the end of June in 2022. And rather than the sort of formal meeting or summit where people sit down and get bored by speeches and panels, there will be a little bit of that, but it's much more a space where people and groups and communities can contribute art, poetry, music, dance, in a sense of solidarity around the values that we would need to emerge from the COVID pandemic, particularly in a way that respects social justice and respect for the environment. I think we've just posted the link, Najma's just posted the link in the chat bar. So if you want to know more about that, its rationale, why it's set up, and how you can contribute or participate or listen, then please either click on that or contact me and Rory Trull after the meeting. I'll put my and Rory Trull's contact details in the chat bar in a minute.
Thank you so much, Paul, for that. I guess it's still, I still have audio active. Yes, Stuart?
Yes, you do.
Oh, perfect. So, I mean, just to say from my side, it was an incredible energy at the launch of the network, and we're really pleased today to introduce the work that we want to do on a new social contract to the GEC community. We hope we have your support, your endorsement, but also your enthusiasm and your energy to work with us on this. We think it's a new frontier. We think it's a moment to enable the GEC to work more closely with social movements that are doing incredible work across the world, to engage with governments. And I think, in our breakout session, we spoke a lot about the importance of having honest brokers, of having intermediaries, of having strong, open, transparent, accountable civil society movements that bridge the span between governments and citizen and social movements. And so this work is an incredibly exciting area for me that truly, I think, takes us one step further and deeper to a societal transition. Thank you so much, Stuart. Back to you.
Thank you, Najma. Again, always inspiring and absolutely marvelous of what we're going to be able to do. I want to thank you all, everybody, for participating so intensively in this. I'm aware that when we do Zoom meetings like this, the expectation is that we can come and listen and we really want to talk, and then we ask to talk. It can get a bit confusing, and I hope I haven't confused you. What you've certainly done for me, and I think what you've done for the people who've given us feedback, is that you've enlightened. You've enlightened us with your wisdom, you've enlightened us with your thoughts, and I hope that this is the start of a beautiful conversation which will continue. Tomorrow, we're going to be continuing this work. Same time, same place, or it's like different Zoom address as you've got. We're going to be talking about how to catalyze a nature-based economy by 2030. Now, leading that process is Najma Mohammed. So if you've enjoyed Najma's interventions today, you're going to get even more tomorrow. She's a wonderful person who has got tremendous insights to bring. Join us tomorrow for how to catalyze a nature-based economy by 2030. Later this afternoon, we will have a network session that will start at 3 o'clock. You are at 2 o'clock, I believe. Sorry, Ben, can you correct me when it comes to your turn on this?
That is 2. It's 2 p.m.
2 o'clock, we have a networking session. If you'd like to meet the coalition, you come along to have a chat, see who we are, and do a little bit more bilateral exchange. You'd be more welcome to come and meet us and talk with us there. Finally, I would like to close out this session with a...
Stuart, I am going to interrupt you. There was a mistake there. Apologies. It is actually 3 p.m. is the networking event this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yes, yeah, right. Okay, carry on.
3 o'clock this afternoon for a networking event. 1 hour, 10 minutes from now. So I would like to close out this session with a short video. Ben, I think you've got this one ready. This video is about the importance of social contract. It's downloadable. You can watch it. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'll see you tomorrow.
Over the last 18 months, COVID-19 has driven 75 million people out of work and 120 million into extreme poverty. Over that same period, the wealth of the world's billionaires more than doubled, from 5 trillion to 13 trillion. How is this possible? We know the system isn't working. Inequality is accelerating, nature is vanishing, democracy is decaying. We need something new, a new vision of a fair and sustainable world, and the rights and responsibilities that will make it work. In short, a new eco-social contract for the 21st century. This new contract needs solid foundations, human rights, and rights for the natural world. It needs many forms of justice. Work must be decent, and diversity is key. Many different voices are calling for transformative change, from the United Nations to Black Lives Matter, from the World Economic Forum to the International Trade Union Congress. To catalyse this diverse movement, UNRIST has teamed up with the Green Economy Coalition to launch a new global research and action network for a new eco-social contract. The network will join the dots between climate justice and social justice. Working with us will be partners from different communities and sectors: advocacy, practice, research and policy making. We're uniting to build a new understanding of how to structure our societies for a green and fair future. Join us and help construct a new eco-social contract that is sustainable, equitable, and ready for the 21st century.